Hi, and welcome to City Desk, the behind-the-scenes look at Santa Barbara's top local news stories. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts, joined by an all-star lineup of local journalists for an inside look at these headlines. Santa Barbara's historic city council election yielded one big surprise and a batch of unanswered questions. What's behind the sudden surprising retirement of Police Chief Cam Sanchez? A shocking murder-suicide case in a prominent political family prompts new debate about gun control. And our 1,000-year drought all but empties Lake Cachuma as alarmed water managers scramble for answers. Joining me to explore these issues, environmental reporter Melinda Burns, Kelsey Brugger, staff reporter for the Santa Barbara Independent, Nick Welsh, editor of the Independent, and Josh Molina, who covers politics for Newshawk. Thank you all for showing up. Josh, there was a big surprise in Tuesday's election. It came on the east side. What happened?
Well, Jason Dominguez was elected to District 1, and that was a big surprise to
us, anyway.
To a lot of people, and certainly the Democratic Party, who had backed Andrea Martinez-Cohen for that spot, and they were behind her. They spent a lot of money on her. They closely packaged her with Cathy Murillo, and I thought she would do a lot better. I think a lot of people thought she would do a lot better, but she had less than half the votes that Jason Dominguez had in the end. And Dominguez ended up playing it really well because he had sought the Democratic Party's endorsement. They turned him away. So he went in the opposite direction, and he courted moderates, he courted business conservatives, and he ended up doing really well and looking like he pulled off a really good campaign. Now, he was the highest fundraiser, not by a lot, but he was the highest fundraiser, so we see that influence of money in politics. But that's it's a big shift, okay? And people sort of thought that it could be Cohen most likely, Murillo, of course, Randy Rouse, and Dominguez got in there and pulled it off, and he did it pretty handily, for sure.
It was really an awful night for the Independent, wasn't it, in terms of your endorsements?
Yeah, let me tell you, a baseball player who hit 66, 100.
Okay, so you got Randy right. That was tough.
We got Randy and Cathy. So 66%. That's not too bad.
No, but it's because you called Andrea a stooge for the machine in your endorsement. Here's our endorsement.
You have to read it right. I said some people might reasonably think she's a stooge.
All right. Were you surprised? You were surprised.
You know what? I didn't know who was going to win the first district. I kind of thought that Andrea Cohen Martinez-Cohen was going to get it just because she had that so-called machine. The machine didn't show up, and Jason worked his butt off. He was, I know people who were like hardcore Democrats, Cathy Murillo supporters over there, and Jason knocked on their door, and this one woman I know, she said he spent 2 hours bending her ear, and at the end, she switched.
She said, I'll vote for you if you leave.
I'll vote for you if you leave. But he worked, and everybody, that is the thing. He really did work. And he's a little bit of something for everybody. He worked for legal aid. He worked for California Rural Legal Assistance. He was a war crimes tribunal for the United Nations. He was a city attorney in L.A. He was a DA in L.A. So he could be a little bit of everything. So I'm a Democrat. He had the Republicans. The interesting thing here is the Republican, not the party because the party didn't, but high-ranking Republicans all came out behind non-Republican candidates. Jason's a Democrat, Jackie's a Democrat, Randy Rouse has declined to state, and Sharon Burns has declined to state.
Yeah, and you spent a lot of time on Milpa Street looking at that business district controversy. So Jason ends up having his celebration at El Bajillo, which was the restaurant in the center of the demonstrations and so on. What signal do you think that sends?
Well, I think that Jacqueline also worked very hard and went house to house something like 3 times, maybe more, in that district, and she was an activist. Of course.
So she was against the business, the large business district.
Yes, she was, and she was at that demonstration. She later said that she was there to try to keep the kids from Poder, sort of, from a larger protest or something, but she had trouble explaining that away. And I think she's a good activist, and maybe we'll see a lot more of her in the future.
But she didn't get a lot of votes.
Nope.
Kelsey, you were out getting color, as we say, on election night.
Yeah, that usually gets people to tell you a lot right immediately.
What stood out? What was interesting to you on election night?
I went to the victory parties, so people were happy, and when I was at Paradise, there weren't a ton of people there.
And there wasn't
honestly.
any food. That's why.
There wasn't any food.
Which surprised me.
Right. Restaurant.
Guy runs a restaurant.
And so I was there when everyone was sort of squinting at the TV to see what the numbers were, and everyone was sort of like, "Oh, I can't see." And, so it was sort of the initial first dump of results that came in, and it showed Randy just way ahead as expected. So that was sort of a celebration, and then pretty soon the SBCC journalism students and some more journalists came in, so that kind of really livened it up for a minute.
Well, Josh was responsible for that.
If it wasn't for your students, it would have been a dead zone at City Hall. I mean, City Hall is usually a political high mass for the vote count, and everybody shows up to be seen and to see who else is there. If you were just looking at that, the vibe was, where is everybody?
Well, it took like 2 minutes to get the numbers.
Well, there was one council member there who wasn't a candidate. Usually, everybody shows up. There were 2 ex-mayors. Nobody was there. It was except when your students were about 25, 30 of them.
Yeah.
I told them to get the scoop before the Independent did. So
how'd that work out?
I think they did well.
So it was interesting to me that at the Dominguez party, which had, I thought, pretty good quesadillas, but be that as it may, Dale Francisco, whose seat is now being taken by Dominguez, and the mayor were both there, which I didn't see her anywhere else. So what does this mean in terms of the dynamic of the council, and what factions are we going to see?
Well, it's a big victory for Helene Schneider and Bendy White. Bendy White, Councilmember Bendy White, he came out the last week and he endorsed Jason Dominguez. So he put his name attached to him. And he's basically saying Dominguez is going to be in our group. It's going to be with Helene Schneider. They are a faction. Randy Rouse might, more often than not, end up siding with that group. Helene Schneider is going to try to use this to her advantage in the congressional race because she needs as much support as she can get right now. And she's going to try to do what Dominguez did. She's also been rebuked by the Democratic Party and Democratic leaders. So she's has to follow that kind of mold. And she had already been moving a little bit toward the middle. It worked for Dominguez on a real small micro level. Maybe some of that can rub off on her. But the idea that she's not at Kathy Murillo's party, that says a lot about where she's at here. But on the council,
is the council going to be more conservative, less conservative?
It's going to be more conservative. Jason is a registered Democrat, but he actively courted moderates and business interests and conservatives.
I would actually thought it would be more moderate because you substitute in a Dale Francisco, who is probably the most rigidly ideological conservative, and probably one of the smartest people in the room, even if he says so himself. And he will be stepping down, and I think that Dominguez is going to be like an E.F. Falcone Democrat, a conservative Democrat who will, he'll be like Benji White on a lot of things. He might be a little bit more forceful about it, and so I think you're going to have a much bigger, a much more militant mush. Yeah,
more
militant mush on the council. So you'll have a block of 4, as you said, with Randy Rouse, Bendy, Helene, and Dominguez. And then you'll have Greg Hart and Kathy kind of on the left-hand side, and Frank will have to figure out what he wants to do about it.
So you have sort of a center-right coalition in the middle, pro-business and kind of pragmatic more than ideological.
But it's a big difference. If Cohen had gotten elected, it would have been entirely opposite of a Dale Francisco. So
right.
You endorsed her. Oh, never mind. So everybody in town thought Kathy would beat Sharon Byrne except for me. And
You didn't think so?
no, in fact, I predicted Sharon. Yeah, well, nobody's going to remember. But Kathy's running for mayor, Bendy's running for mayor, and Hal Conklin, former Mayor Hal Conklin, was out at City Hall, and he made it clear he's running for mayor. How many people do you think?
And then, of course, is Randy Ralph going to run for mayor?
His wife was pretty adamant.
Right.
Yeah, that
You won't be running for mayor, honey.
So how many of those people do you think?
Is going to run for mayor?
Yeah, all of the above?
All of the above.
Yeah. And what happened to the vaunted Democratic Party organization, Josh, that you told us about?
The juggernaut.
The juggernaut. What Duraka Larimore Hall didn't have a good night, as he made clear.
Well, worked for Kathy. They weren't able to do enough for Cohen. They did do a lot of campaigning, door to door, up until the polls closed. But I think at the end of the day, Dominguez went one-on-one to so many more doors, and he made that personal connection. And I don't know how many doors Cohen went to, but I do know that she had lots of support and lots of help. And the one thing about Dominguez is he knows his stuff. He's knowledgeable. You could argue whether he's just telling you what you want to hear. But I know at those forums, he came across a lot more informed and prepared to be specific on the issue than Cohen did. And it's possible that other people noticed that one-on-one as well.
Well, okay, just to wrap, I mean, that's one of the things that advocates of district elections said, that your representative would be much more accessible, one-to-one, which is great. I just wonder about how accountable people are going to be other than to their district, with Kathy got, 962 votes or something, so we'll see. But I still have many concerns about district elections, as does Kelsey, because she was disenfranchised once again. Right. All right, just to switch, you have been working on a really grisly story, a murder-suicide in the Valley involving the family of Steve Pappas, former candidate for supervisor. What's the circumstances?
So last Saturday, October 31st, Halloween, someone by the name of Max Pappas, who is Steve Pappas's son, got a gun. We don't know where he got this gun. It was not registered to his name, was not registered to either of his parents' names, but shot his mom in the head, got into a car, drove down the street, and sounds like shot himself while he was driving, veered off the road, was found. The CHP and sheriff were called. It was a car accident report. They show up and see a dead body. That was all on Saturday, and sort of information since then has been trickling in.
So it kind of mirrors, in a sense, the national debate about these kinds of incidents. One side says there's too many guns and you have to really regulate guns more, and the other side says no, the problem is people have mental illness. Now, was he being treated for mental illness? So
we have heard that he was in a recovery home for some time. He had been reportedly on meds for at least 10 days, and the story is that we have heard from a reliable source is that his meds were upped, and then the next day he went out and got the gun. So would he have got the gun otherwise? Don't know.
Where did he get the gun? We don't know.
We don't know where he got the gun. If he got the gun on the black market, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how hard it is to get a gun on the black market, but I can't imagine it's that hard. You're also in the Valley. I don't know how.
Have we heard from Steve Pappas on this?
No, haven't heard from him. There was supposed to be a memorial on Wednesday for both of them, and so that was kind of another interesting piece. I mean, this is the second murder-suicide in the Valley in like 3 weeks. So early October, the Hamiltons, Kimberly and Greg, Greg shot Kimberly and then shot himself.
They were a couple?
They were a couple, married couple. They were going through a divorce, as I understand it, and so there was a joint memorial for them. And I think a lot of people, especially friends of Kimberly, didn't exactly like that. He did this to her. So I have no idea if that's why the memorial this week was canceled for the Pappases, but it did strike me that it was going to be, the two of them.
What were the circumstances about where the gun came from in that case?
In that first case, I don't know. That I don't know.
So are people talking about gun control and stuff?
Well, I mean, if you think about this case, I mean, in the area, the most recent one that comes to everyone's mind, of course, is Elliot Rodger. And I think that really ignited the gun control movement, not one more. Richard Martinez has been very active in that. So I think
he's a father of one of the kids that was
killed. Right. So I don't know that just this one incident, but I think it's been happening. I think, as Nick had pointed out earlier to me, that the 10 years ago was the post office anniversary of the post office shooting in Goleta. So it's definitely on people's minds, not just here but nationally. Some people I've spoken to in the Valley, it's the argument that you were making before. This isn't about guns. This is about mental health. This is about violence in the media. So.
And to follow up on that, I mean, the county of LA tried to pass a restriction on, large ammo clip sales. And that's been challenged in court by 30 sheriffs from around the state, because the sheriffs, off-duty sheriffs, want to be able to have big clips, because who knows when you're off-duty and you're going to go on duty. So they're fighting it. But one of the things here was the mental health issue. A lot of these killings involve young people, sort of
young men,
young
white
men, yeah, young white men, and there is a severe shortage of psychiatric help for adolescent people who are mentally ill. If you try to find a psychiatrist who will take that kind of patient, they're disappearing in Santa Barbara County. And if you're trying to get an appointment, it's 8 months down the road for your first visit.
What's the situation with funding for that kind of service?
A lot of times your insurance, if you have it, doesn't cover it. Sansom Medical, they used to cover, or our Blue Shields, they used to cover psychiatrists. Now they don't. So you increasingly have to pay your own, and psychiatrists aren't cheap. It was $150, $300.
Yeah, well, certainly our condolences go to Steve Pappas, and it's difficult when in a case like this, I think, to separate yourself and mm-hmm. look at it from a distance, which you have to do.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Melinda, you reported on a big confab of regional water managers.
Nick and I were both there. We felt like it was, as Nick said, it was a family reunion, because there were people that we were covering 10, 15, 20 years ago who were there.
What was the message that came out? El Nino's going to save us or not?
Well, I think we're all hoping that these are the last months of one of the worst droughts ever. I mean, some of the water managers at that meeting had seen 2 of them. Maybe it's okay to have 1 in your career, but we're seeing 2. And let me back up a little before we look at that meeting. But it's a good time to take stock right now, because we are maybe at the end of this drought, because we think we're going to get a very wet winter. So how did we do? Well, on the demand side, I would say we did well. The water agencies got the message to residents, and residents really cut
25-30%
yes.
conservation, particularly
well
in Goleta.
Beyond what Jerry Brown was asking for. Goleta's doing a great job. They're down to 52 gallons a day. Look at your water bill. You can see there how many gallons per capita per day you're using. Of course, on the other end, we've got Montecito with 200 plus gallons per capita, but they've cut almost 50%. So meeting those targets pretty well.
And what about the other side?
On the supply side, which was what that meeting was about at the Buellton Marriott a couple weekends ago, was Goleta's got less than about a year's worth of water, and the intake tunnel that takes water to the south coast is on dry land. It's a huge tower, and there's a barge pumping, through a long flexible hose up into the intake tower, about half a mile long, and the tower is about 100 feet from the receding shores. So it's not a good picture, and about more than half of that water in the lake is going downstream.
And there's like two cups of water left in Lake Kachuma or something?
So, yeah, and so it was supposed to last 7 years. It lasted 4. In other words, there's no new allocations from the lake this year. It's all carryover water. None of the districts get new Kachuma water for this year, and it was supposed to last 3 more years. What happened was that the agencies that control the lake did not, they abandoned a long-standing practice of cutting back when the water hit the halfway mark. So they did not take a cut back in 2013 when that mark was hit. And if they had, the argument is people would have started saving sooner, and there would still be a supply.
What did they say, 20,000 acre feet, which is roughly a year's worth of water, had they cut back then?
Yeah.
Well, I'm always railing against almonds and so forth, and there's a piece in Forbes about a couple who owns some land in the San Joaquin Valley, Stuart and Linda Resnick, and they are using 120 billion gallons a year, 2/3 on what? Nuts and almonds, which is enough to supply San Francisco's 900,000 residents for a decade. It's all about agriculture. 2% of the GDP of the state and 80% of the water. And ultimately, El Nino would be fine here, but if it doesn't rain and snow up north, it's not really going to increase the supply very much, is it?
Nope.
It's the snowpack that we need.
Yeah, California doesn't work without snow.
Yeah, California's not going to work anyway with all the people and the supply.
So what happens in a year in Goleta if it doesn't rain?
Pumping the groundwater till, really, they're already pumping it very heavily. So is Carpinteria, so is Santa Barbara. So there is that large basin in Goleta which could keep going for years, maybe. But there would be new restrictions. You would not be able to water, period, outside.
All right.
Ag would be cut off.
Well, my prediction, we'll be talking about this on City Desk for the next 1,000 years.
Well, I think we're going to see lower allocations from Kachuma, I think, in the future. They'll have to redo the contract. And that means even if it rains, we're still going to have to find that water from somewhere.
Nuts, almonds, take it to the bank. All right, Nick, you weren't here last time.
I missed it.
Yeah, well, you missed it, and Starshine was here, and we congratulated her on
whooping my ass yet again.
Being the columnist of the year for the 32nd year in a row.
I have yet to ever win in my own house.
Okay, what did you write about this week? What's your column?
Oh, it was all about Willie Chamberlain and the, I know where you're going. So Willie Chamberlain and the air tanker base of Santa Maria. Oh, and what did Starshine write about?
She wrote about hymens, exactly.
Yeah. and I, it's like, if I start writing about scrotum, do you think that is going to be like the male equivalent of her sort of every 4th week having something about vagina?
I don't
think it's going to
I
work.
talked to Starshine about coming on.
I think my stock will plummet even further.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Don't you think we should have like this scrotum monologues?
No. All right. So, also happy birthday. You're turning 60 on
Yeah.
Monday,
Yeah.
and we're all pleased with that.
Yeah, I'm
so,
pleased with that too.
all right, hopefully
Yeah.
by the time
I'll
you're
be bitter.
65,
I'll be bitter and angry.
you'll be able to. All right, tell us about the police chief. Cam Sanchez had a terrible auto accident, and about 2 days after that,
He said, "See you later."
he said, "I'm going to retire after 15 years." Going to suddenly, what's going on?
You know, it was sort of everybody was hoping that he would step down anyway. I think when the new city administrator was hired, it was made very clear to him, you know what, Paul Casey, we'd really like to see a new police chief. Cam Sanchez has been here 15 years. That is, it's not a statewide record, but most chiefs last about 5 years, maybe 3. It's a record for Santa Barbara. And at a certain point, you wear out your welcome, and the degree of morale problems in the department did sort of start to spill over. I don't know if it's critical mass, but you know, the number of cops they have on patrol is way down. It's like, if you listen to the police department, it's like 93%. If you listen to the union, it's 75%.
But how is that his fault? I don't.
Well, it's his job as chief to be in charge of recruiting. So you have to keep new cops coming in as the old ones go. Now, some of them are going to UCSB because you have lifetime insurance, and they got a cool chief. Here, I mean, obviously the Ferguson effect, and everybody's down on cops, nobody wants to be a cop. It's hard to recruit. But I don't think they have their strongest guy in charge of recruiting, and the numbers have not been keeping up.
All right, where's the new chief quickly coming, inside or outside?
Don't know. Outside.
And what about the new council? Is that going to have an effect?
It's definitely going to have an effect.
In what sense? That less community policing, more?
No, I think that everybody loves community policing, and I don't see that support going away. The new chief is just going to have to be much better at recruiting.
I mean, they all have to commute in, right?
They all have to commute in.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to drive an hour to get
All
to
right.
work?
We'll watch that, see who's coming. And thank you, Melinda and Josh, Nick.
That's it?
Kelsey.
That's it?
I know, it went really fast tonight. And thanks to our crew, Oscar and our high-ranking senior executive producer, Hep Freund, Mark, Ty, Shauna, Chad, Angelina, Vostok, Nick, and Griffin. And thank you all for watching. Check us out on Facebook, sbcitydesk.com, and also check out Newsmakers. We're going to have a report from election night and a complete review of the food. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on City Desk.